Hey everybody, it's Wayne with Tying Tales, and today I'm going to make a quick video for you to give you a little bit of background about myself and kind of the reasons why I'm going into self-filming here. So basically, I've grown up in Northwest Pennsylvania my entire life. I was born here, raised here, I still live here, and I hunt 90-95% public land. I've always wanted to film my own hunts. It's just something I've never got into until the summer of 2019. So a good friend of mine gave me a camera so I could get started on filming, because he has been filming for several years and he no longer had a use for the older camera since he upgraded last year. So he was nice enough to give me a camera to let me start to film my own hunts. So I went and I bought a good camera, a good microphone for the camera, because I wanted good audio. So the next thing I do was I went and bought a good camera arm. Actually, the camera arm is from Fourth Arrow Archery, which are phenomenal products, by the way. But, well, not cheap, but good products. So I go and I buy this good camera arm, a good fluid head, and a good microphone. So I have a pretty mediocre, poor camera, but I got a good microphone and I have a good camera arm. So my thinking is if I have good audio, good smooth filming, and mediocre footage as far as quality, then I'll have a pretty decent setup. And to get into self-filming, I think that's a good start. I didn't want to jump into it head first and spend thousands of dollars on equipment, not knowing if I was going to enjoy it or if it was just going to be too cumbersome and too much stuff to carry into the woods, which, trust me, it's a lot of stuff to carry in the woods, but it's worth it. So last year, I get all my setup. I'm pumped. I'm ready for archery season. And the first night in the tree stand in Ohio, the first Saturday of season, I get my camera arm set up and my camera set up, and I was not familiar with the camera and how it worked. I wasn't familiar with the camera arm, and that was a big mistake that I made looking back now. But I make mistakes so I can learn from my mistakes. And I had my camera arm pointing straight ahead with my camera on, obviously. But it was far enough that I could reach it, but it was hard to reach. I had my camera arm almost fully extended because I didn't want it to get in my way of trying to shoot my bow. Well, the trail that I was expecting the deer to come out was to my left and down the hill. But my camera's facing this way. Trail's this way, camera's facing this way. Not a good idea. But I didn't know this. The first night in the tree stand, how often does a nice buck come by that you want to shoot? Well, fortunately for me, that night, the biggest buck that I've actually seen in bow range comes by at 30 yards. And I was able to make a marginable shot on it. But I recovered the deer the next morning, hit it in the liver, got some gut on the arrow. But the short story is I got the deer, but I did not get the film on footage. Yeah, I didn't get the film on footage. I did not get to film my shot, okay? So I was really disappointed. I went through all this stuff. I started doing, some scenery shots and my bow hanging, and like I did my introductory, before and what day it was, and I was pumped. I was so excited to be in the woods finally with the camera, and I get an opportunity at the biggest buck I've ever seen, and I don't get the shot on film because my camera was in the wrong position. But I was afraid of spooking the deer, so I didn't even turn my camera on. I just made the shot and got the deer, which I'm super, super pleased about. And I'll show you guys some footage and stuff of the deer that what footage I do have later on in my series here. But that was my first experience with self-filming, and I would say my first fail at self-filming. But I think everyone that self-films has experiences like these. And so my goal is to grow, get better, and learn from these experiences. So that was the first night, and I ended up losing my job the last day of October in 2019 due to my company closing down. So I had a phenomenal November because I was wide open in November. Now I was looking for a job, but I was in the woods as much as possible. I was really hoping for Pennsylvania to pan out and shoot a good buck, which it did. It panned out well for me, and I ended up shooting a very old buck in Pennsylvania that was at least 7.5 years old. It doesn't score great, maybe 110, 115, 120 at the most, but just a super cool old deer that I'm ecstatic to shoot. The buck I shot in Ohio actually grossed 151, so it was my biggest buck to date. But neither of these bucks I got on film footage. And the hunt in Pennsylvania was a different story because it happened really quick, because it was during the rut. I shot the buck in November. I didn't have time to get my camera turned. My camera was facing in front of me where I thought the deer were going to come from. The buck comes from behind me. You know, short story. I make the shot, kill the buck, it runs 30 yards, falls over. Didn't get it on footage. But I did, when I got down on my tree stand, I did film myself getting out of my stand and walking over to where I found my arrow, tracking the deer. So I did do this on my second hunt, which I did not do on my first hunt. So I'm learning. Let's put it that way. I have a bunch of filler footage I filmed from hunts all season, but not a lot of action, some small 8 points and stuff like that, but nothing crazy. But I did, I'm going to throw a video together with both my hunts, my Ohio hunt and my PA hunt later in the season. I'm going to do some editing on them and get some footage up for you guys just to let you know. Even though I don't have a lot of footage, I just want you guys to see what you shouldn't do if you're going to start self-filming, so maybe you won't make the same mistakes that I did. But it comes back to the camera that my buddy gave me. It was not able to accept a remote, and if you're going to self-film your own hunts, you almost have to have a remote. A remote is so key to being able to, on your fluid head, just zoom in, zoom out, turn your camera on, record. It's all right here with your thumb. You can literally do this and you can control your camera. For my camera, I had to reach up, turn my microphone on because it didn't support the auto on feature of the microphone because the camera was cheap. So I had to turn the microphone on, I had to turn the camera on, I had to hit record, and then I had to reach on top of the camera to zoom in and zoom out, and then I could film. But it was still, you can get some footage that way, but it's not great footage because you're either zoomed out too far or zoomed in too far, which is a huge issue that I see a lot of guys running into. A lot of guys zoom in too far, and then there's shaky footage, and the deer, you know, you want to stay zoomed out, but you want to be zoomed in far enough to see what actually happens. So there's that happy medium that you have to learn how to use, and having a remote is huge to help with that, with your self-filming your hunts. So the camera setup wasn't the best, but it got me into self-filming. So right now this video is my first video that I have filmed, or am filming, on my new camera that just came in the mail yesterday, and it is a Sony FDR AX100. So this camera is 4K. It costs about $1,200, but it's leaps and bounds ahead of my other camera, and I think it's going to do some really good footage this year for you guys. So I'm super excited about this camera, and I'm pumped that I'm finally getting a good setup. I'm learning from my mistakes, and hopefully next year I can actually get a kill shot on film. This year I didn't shoot any does because I ended up going to Newfoundland and I shot a moose. So I really didn't need the meat. So I shot a moose in Newfoundland, I shot a buck in Ohio, and I shot a buck in Pennsylvania. So I had a phenomenal 2019 season. I just wasn't able to capture the footage I wanted, but from here on out, I'm hoping to progress and get better at that. So in this video, I'm kind of just testing out the camera, going to do some editing on it, learning a little bit on, you know, stuff like that. Just, that's all this really intention of this video is, introduce myself. But I'm going to show you some sheds that I found this year in 2020 already in Northwest Pennsylvania on public property. So last year we found 176 sheds on public property in Northwest Pennsylvania. And we put a lot of time into shed hunting. We really enjoy it. We like to inventory our deer, and honestly, we find sheds to help us find shooter bucks for next year. We find locations for bucks that we didn't even know were out there. We find deer that we didn't know existed, and then we try to hunt them. And it doesn't work out all the time, but sometimes it does. We have found sheds off bucks that we've hunted for 7 years on public property and have killed that buck. So there's a little bit of a trick to it, and I'll jump into that in my later videos. But first, tonight, I'm going to show you guys a shed off of a deer that I had on camera last summer. I never saw the deer in person last fall, but I would have not shot this buck if I had the opportunity. It was a buck that I'm going to guess ranges the 110, 115 inch range. Probably a 2.5-year-old deer on public property. So I'm hoping that next year he's 120 plus, and if he is, he's a 3.5-year-old 120 plus on public. He would get the go ahead. But this is his right side right here. As you can see, he's nothing special. He's got decent 2s, decent 3s, and a decent brow tine, so he's got good ones. So overall, he's just a good symmetrical deer. Nothing fancy, you know, probably 16 inches wide. But he has potential, and this deer, he's in an area that's not highly hunted, so he's got low pressure, and we know where he's staying. So hopefully next fall we have some encounters with this buck right here. I have a cool camera photo of him this summer of him sticking his tongue out. He's actually eating apple, but it looks like he's sticking his tongue out me. So kind of cool. Got a little bit of history with this deer. Find a shed, and like I said, next year at 3.5 years old, this buck's probably going to be a hit lister for us. This shed right here is a little bit smaller than the last shed I just showed you. Shorter 3s, decent 2s, short 1s. Not a lot of mass. I'm going to say this is a 1.5-year-old buck in Pennsylvania. It could be a 2.5, but I'm thinking it's a 1.5 with really nice potential. And a lot of guys, they'd be like, "Oh, this is the other half of the buck you just showed us." But I mean, you hold them up, there's no comparison. It's not even close. And I found these antlers about 15-20 miles apart, so I definitely know it's not the same deer. But it's definitely not the other half of this buck for sure. That's a guarantee. Not the same mass, not the same angle, nothing. It's definitely not the same deer. But so that's kind of cool. I don't know what that buck, we're probably not going to hunt it. It's a place we don't hunt. Just I found a random shed the one day when I was working. This is another little shed I found this year. Actually, technically it's not a shed. It's broken off. So it must have broke last fall when they were fighting. But it's still a cool little shed. I call it a shed. Here's another little 4-point side I found this year, freshie. Not a deer I'm going to go after, obviously. I found this little 3-point side in the same place that I found these. So I found these to get similar, within 30 yards of each other, but neither one's, I mean, they're both small bucks. Maybe in a couple of years they'll be shooters for us. I found a decent 5-point side that was a year old. Yet again, young deer, 1.5 years, maybe 2.5, good potential, but this is a place I don't normally hunt as well, so I probably won't hunt this deer. Found an old 2.5-year-old. It's a shed that's probably 2.5 years old. I'm not sure if you can see there, it broke. I don't know if that broke from fighting or if something chewed it off. I'm not quite sure. But super long main beam, long tines. That's a good buck, but that buck might be dead because this shed's 2-year-old shed. But it's still pretty cool. And then I found a couple old sheds that's chewed. They're really heavily chewed. That's probably a 4 or 5-year-old shed. And then this shed here is nothing, just a little Y. It's last year's shed. I found that this year too. So far this year I found 11 sheds in 2020, which I'm behind my pace from last year, but we've had too much snow, so I haven't got a lot of time to look. But the first shed of the year is the one I really want to talk about. And this shed, it's a pretty good buck. So my buddy, he found the other half of it, and he told me, he's like, hey, I found a nice shed, and he's like, you need to spend some time in here looking. So I'm like, heck yeah. So I spent about 2 hours after he told me that, and I ended up finding the other half. This is a deer that I've never hunted the area. It's on public land, national forest in Pennsylvania, and probably 130, 135 inch buck. Maybe not even 130. It's pushing 130, but it's a nice buck. It's heavy. It's a mature deer. It's not 140, 150 inch buck like people want, like what I want. But this deer is a deer that I would definitely shoot. And next year I'm going to focus some on this deer. I'm going to run some cameras in the area. So this shed right here was the first shed of my 2020 season that I found. And as you can tell from the photos, he's got a nice G1, nice brow tine, nice G2. It's about 9 inches long. Nothing super duper. Threes are pretty short. But he's just super heavy, super cool deer. Super cool deer. So I'm kind of pumped about that deer because I'm thinking that maybe next fall, next summer we can get on him and hopefully, possibly shoot him. But I'm not getting my hopes up on it. He's about an hour away from where I normally hunt. So I don't even know if I'm going to hunt that deer. But it's just it's cool. I mean, I love finding sheds. And anytime you can find a shed of this caliber right here, it is cool. I mean, that's a nice antler. No matter where you come from, it's not a nice heavy antler, and that's why I shed hunt, because I like antlers. Even if I don't hunt the deer, I just like finding these bad boys. So that's gonna be it for me tonight, guys. So I really hope maybe you guys learned something from this. So basically, a summary is, I'm doing this because I want to help not only myself, but I really want to help other people. And I hope these are somewhat educational. And it'll be a learning process, because it already has been a learning process. But if I can expand on what I know, and I can learn, and I can become a better hunter from self-filming, then that's really my goal.